this, how you use those techniques will develop the rhythm in which you speak. Okay? So I want to look at things called poetic devices. Has anybody heard of poetic devices before? Does anybody read any poetry since leaving high school? Yeah, some little bits every now and again. I don't read a great deal of poetry. I've started to get a little bit more into it from doing this training course, and I've started again when I was doing the Burns Supper. I read quite a lot of the Burns pieces, and it started to all sort of match up for me in terms of how rhythm works. Poetry is a really great way to demonstrate how rhythm works. To me, it always used to seem that poetry was just you make the last word on every line or every other line rhyme with each other, and that was a poem. And that's not necessarily the case. So poetic devices is easily, the easiest example is using poetry to talk about poetic devices. But there are actually different techniques that writers, journalists, speakers, advertising men use when they write things down, when they write speeches and when they speak them, that engage an audience through the rhythm and the rhyme that's created when they're doing it. Okay? So, I wanted to have a look, first of all, a quick English lesson, to take you back to high schools and universities, at these three things. Does anybody know, first of all, what personification is? What the description of personification is? No? Okay, in that case, I'll fill in the blanks for you. I've got it written down on this piece of paper here, you see, so I already know. Personification is taking non-human traits, like, human traits like feelings and emotions and characteristics, and linking them to non-human things, like objects and so on. Okay? We're going to go through some poetry in a minute, some poetry readings tonight, which will allow you to see these examples. Metaphors. Can anybody remember what a metaphor is? Yes. Daniel, what is a metaphor?
A metaphor is where you say something is something else. So for example, you might say,
they're hard to come up with. I know, because when I was writing this training, I was like, yeah, that's easy, I'll just give an example. It's hard to come up with an example. But you're right, a metaphor is saying something is something else. It's a comparison between two things, but you say this thing is that thing. And normally, they're two completely different things that you're making a comparison between. Okay? A simile, on the other hand, is a comparison between two things where you liken them together. So something that is like something else, or something that is as something else. Whereas a metaphor is something that is something else.
I thought of one now.
Yeah? It's a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
But how about if we were to say something along the lines of, my love is like a red, red rose? No, it's a simile, because my love is like a red, red rose. So we're using simile, which is like. But if we were to say, Juliet is the sun, we'd be using a metaphor, because we're comparing two completely unlike things and saying that they are exactly alike. Juliet is the sun. Okay? It's not hugely important, but as we move on, you'll see how people use it in poetry and how people use it in writing. Okay? What they're essentially doing is they're creating imagery. And imagery is something that helps to get people engaged in your speaking. Imagery can come in all sorts of different forms. So we're going to turn to the handouts, where I have stolen some lovely poems off the internet and some lovely speeches off the internet. Does anybody feel confident enough to come up and read the first poem on the sheet out? Any volunteers for that? Yeah? Come on up then and read the first poem to us. And what I want you to have a look for, whilst Anna was reading this out, the rest of you, is, do you spot any personification, any metaphors, and any simile as he's reading this out?
Day after day, the sky turns from day to night, like a never-ending circle. When the bright night takes over after the end of the day, and the sun slowly hides her face from view, the stars are the lamps in the sky, burning bright in the heavenly height.